Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I'm a comic book artist, writer, creator, and I share my process here with you on the internet. And if you would like to subscribe to my Patreon, you can see bonus behind-the-scenes content. You can see my comic book pages before anyone else. Watch as I make them. I also do a bonus live stream at least once, if not twice a month. So head on over to patreon.com, subscribe over there. If you'd like to follow the work that I share on social media, my Twitter, my Tumblr, my Instagram, you can go to newsletter.jeremy.net. That takes all the best of my social media posts from the month, collects them into one little package and sends off to your email inbox. You just catch up with it there in one place. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comics, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up physical copies of my books. You can also, if you read digitally, you can buy them on Amazon Kindle or Comixology. What physical books, you might ask? Well, I have my first graphic novel that I self-published. I'm the artist and writer on. It is called Eye of the Gods. It's a psychological thriller about a man who is cursed with visions he cannot control. It's a self-contained story, black and white, crime noir thriller. It's good for fans of Enemy of the State, people who like fans of the Dead Zone, thrillers that have a sense of the paranormal or supernatural happening in it. You can also get volume 1 of my comic book Morning Star. This is this collects issues 1 through 4. I'm currently working on issue 8 right now. So you can get issues 1 through 4 collected into one volume. It is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. So it is a supernatural Western fantasy. Also has a bunch of back matter in the back, behind the scenes, excerpts from scripts, my thumbnails, early character designs, very early sketchbook that I published, kind of chronicling the origins of the series. All of that available on my store at amazon.jeremy.net. So, let's see here. I see Trevor Nelson's in the chat. Hey, Trevor, how's it going? Amar is here. Happy Sunday. Let me switch back. Let me see if there's anything I need to change here. First off, you guys let me know if there's any difference in sound quality, if I sound a little farther away. I had a bit of a computer failure this morning, which is the reason why I got started late, and I had to switch to my laptop. So I presumed that my laptop audio would be pretty good, but you never know. So let me know if the audio, how I set stuff up here. But in a pinch, this seemed to work out, just being able to change how I had my setup. I also want to let you guys know that this is going to be the last live stream for 2020. And I think we're all happy for 2020 to be over. We're hoping that 2021 will be a better year, but I don't think I'm going to have the time to do it. I think the next normal scheduled one would be like the day after Christmas or like 2 days after Christmas. And I'm probably going to be busy with family stuff. So I think that this is my last one for the year. So I hope that everyone, mind you, the people that are on Patreon will still be doing art book study group, and I'm going to do that at least this coming Monday, possibly the Monday after that. So we'll have 1, maybe 2 more Patreon live streams. So that's also for the Patreon subscribers. We'll still be able to catch up, talk a little bit more before the year's out, and I'll also be there active on the Discord, checking the Discord server. So that said, let us get into it. So I am working on page 21 of a 40-page issue. And this issue, as I've mentioned, this series is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. We are now at basically the war in heaven. Lucifer has a bunch of angel-demon hybrids. He's recruited along with armies of demons to just take over. And in the midst of this, we have Michael, who just got kicked through a building, coming out of a wall of flames, grabbing a sword. And he's just coming up here. There's a bunch of these rebel angels, and Michael is he's had enough. It's no more Mr. Nice Guy time. He's hacking and slashing through these guys. So I have noticed as I've been drawing these pages, so I'm getting little ink smudges. I think I've mentioned this. I switched to wearing these cotton gloves that animators wear a lot of times, so they don't get any oil in the animated cells, and I found that they keep me from getting prevent fewer ink smears on the page, but I still get a few. And for a while, I was just wearing them in one hand while I was holding the page because I rotate it around as I ink so I can get a nice natural arc, however I want to hold or position the page. But I've actually found that sometimes the hand holding the page was getting a little bit of picking up a little bit of ink or leaving oil on the surface. And mind you, it's just very, very minor. It's just the oils that are in our skin. But sometimes I'll accidentally, you know, a palm will rest on an area that maybe isn't 100% dry, or just the oils in my skin might make the ink smear. And while holding it, just shifting my hand a little bit can cause some smudges. And, you know, frequently the actual finished comic book page isn't really perfect. All this stuff is stuff I can clean up in Photoshop. You can see up here on this shotgun, it might be hard because it's probably a little blurry, not focused considering how close I am. Let me move a little bit away. But there's like little schmutz around here, little bits of ink smear and smudges. These are all things I'll take out in Photoshop. But just wearing 2 gloves at once will help prevent that a little bit. So I've switched. I bought a pack of 12, so I have plenty of them laying around. They work for either hand. So I just thought, well, why don't I cut another one and use one for holding the page? And this page, what's interesting is I'd actually drawn this shotgun twice. And then I thought to myself, because I was drawing a pump shotgun, and I'm like, wait, would they even have a pump shotgun in a Western? And I thought, crap, because the gun I drew, I just sort of made it up out of my head, which I know is bad form. Trevor being a vet, I have to imagine you're like, dude, get your guns right. But I went through and I found a DK book, the Dorling Kintley books, and I looked up the first pump shotgun was by Remington. Well, actually, the first one that was successful was in 1890. I forget the exact number, but it would have still been available during Western times. But it was, you know, the 1890s. And there was one at the beginning of like around 1891, 1892 that Remington made that was crap and people were not happy with it. And that one was a failure. And then they redesigned it. So I redrew this to look like the Remington single action pump shotgun. So I thought, all right, at least I tried to make it a little bit more accurate. And that's something I really want to try and pay attention to going forward is if I'm drawing any weapons, I really should have, whether it's guns, swords, armor, I should try to make it a habit of pulling reference and having it. And that's one of the constant battles for comic creators. You're trying to work quickly. And sometimes looking up reference can be, I don't want to say it's a drag. It just slows the process down. You know, I have to see if there's a way I can adjust this camera without making it too skewed and distorted. Because I notice now using this camera that if I move away from the screen at all, I drop into shadow really quickly. Whereas my other camera, oddly enough, seemed to be really good about lighting. And it could just be the matter that I need to mess with the settings on the laptop to have the brightness at a better level. But now I want to see if I can lean a little bit more forward, tweak this so that you're not getting as much distortion. So we'll see here. All right. I think that'll do. All right, let's get started because I've been sitting here jabbering long enough. At this point, I have finished all of the inking with my my number 2 brush, getting my large details out of the way. That's what I try to do is just ink all of the major stuff, all the major masses. It used to be that I would just ink the holding lines and then go in and do the detail, then spot my blacks. But lately, I have been trying to do as much with the number 2 brush and then just try to come in and just do the detail at the end with the, like almost as if the details are like me doing highlights. Something else I noticed in inking, so I usually use a number 2 brush and I mostly ink with a number 2 round. And that is this brush that's here on the left. I noticed that I grabbed another brush to start using and it started fraying, not fraying, but it's not giving me sticking to as much of a point as I'd like. And this one that's on the right, this one, is actually a number 2 script instead of a round. And I think I may have bought it by accident. I think the fact that the brush on the left, the round, is shorter helps it keep its point longer. I don't know why, but it seems like it's working a little bit better than the script brush. So in the future, I'm going to try and make sure I stick with rounds instead of scripts. The script brushes will give me a decent line, but I mean, they'll give me a great line. It's just a matter of their durability. They don't seem to last that long. And yes, I buy cheap brushes because I don't take care of them. I can throw them away. But I'd like a brush to last me at least 10 to 20 pages. I'd really prefer, if I can get through an entire issue with a brush, that's good. Sometimes they kind of crap out on me after 20. I'm mad about that. But this one seems to be crapping out after about 10 pages, which for me, that's just not good enough. I see Amar in the chat says, why is that in a perfect world if I could have all of my sets of characters created in Blender, so all I have to do is think about the poses or the angles of characters or environments? And Trevor says, I could go to Real Sables and get about a number 4. Script brushes have a weird, weak feel on the page. Yeah, I think that is just the fact of them being a little bit longer. They don't seem to have as much snap. And, well, I'm using synthetic brushes too. So the synthetic brushes seem to always have a good snap for me. No, people for years, every time I did research on inking, people always said, you know, get a Sable, a Kolinsky brush, preferably a Winsor Newton or a Raphael. And those, everyone tells me those are the industry standard for inking comics. The reason why I have not indulged in those is because most of the time when I'm inking, the pandemic is the first time I've been able to ink at home all the time. Most of the time when I'm inking, I've got like a little mobile setup, a little bottle of to wash my brushes, a little bottle of Murphy's soap oil, which is what I've been using to clean them. I find that works even better than soap cleaner. But my point is that I don't want to ruin a really nice, expensive brush. And I know that even on my own, without, even if I had the facilities to properly rinse and clean my brush after every use, I still probably wouldn't take great care of them. And when I'm inking at some weird table on a lunch break, or if I'm meeting with friends for coffee and I'm doing inking that way, I'm definitely not in a scenario where I can properly really get my brushes clean, take care of them, maintain them. And so I can't remember who suggested it, but somebody said, you know, instead of getting really nice brushes and destroying those, you know, use cheap brushes that you can just treat like crap and beat up. So the approach I've taken, which again, I shouldn't be complaining about my brushes not lasting if this is the approach, but you know, I'm buying brushes that are like $2 brushes, and I just treat them the same way you would treat a crow quill or a nib. I just use them for however many pages they last for, and when they stop holding their point, I mean, I do, you know, I clean them and I do the sharpening of them, where I twist them to try, after I get them really clean as I can, to try and sharpen them back to a point. But even with that, you know, they usually hold a point for about 20 pages, and then I either toss them, or I have a jar of brushes that I keep that are beat up, and I'll use those for doing dry brush or things where I don't necessarily need a nice sharp point, and I'll keep those around just to you know, just to beat the crap out of. So yeah, you know, maybe just for a change of pace, I will buy a couple of Sable brushes and just see what the experience is like of working up with them. But for me, this process of using cheap brushes and just, you know, knowing that they're treating them like they're a disposable item has seemed to serve me. Let me put it this way, I've been satisfied with it. And I think I would be heartbroken if I got a really nice brush and was getting a really great line out of it, and then just one day it just craps out on me because I haven't been taking care of it. So, maybe I don't want to expose myself to that kind of heartbreak, knowing full well that it's my fault for not taking care of the brushes. Actually, Trevor, that's a good question. If you ink more with sable brushes, do you find that a brush is something that it's just a tool you keep indefinitely? You take good care of it and you'll have it for years? Or do you find that as it is, you maybe get a certain amount of mileage, you get a certain number of pages or a certain number of months or years out of a brush? I am curious about that, or how often you need to buy new brushes. And who knows, maybe I'll try decent brushes, take care of them, and be like, what was I wasting my time and money on those crap brushes for? Because other comp professionals have said, yeah, if you take care of a good sable brush, it can last you a decade or longer. So that might be it. That might be the secret. Maybe I'll switch to that. Let's see here. Trevor also says, yeah, no feedback through the bristles. I found if I use a number 4 round, I get a huge variety of marks without changing brushes. See, that's the funny thing about the variety of lines. When I first started inking with brushes, for me it was important to get brushes of different sizes because I had always been intimidated by trying to ink with a brush, and every time I had tried before, I would get something like a 4 or a 6. And this is going through high school and college and trying to ink with brushes. And I found that I thought that I was just a bad inker. And what really the truth is yes, I was a bad inker, but I just didn't have the manual dexterity or the control to get refined lines out of brushes. And when I started using brush pens, and I found that they were giving me the kind of lines that I wanted out of comic book inking, I thought, oh, wait a minute. Look at the point. Look at the size of these tips. These are just smaller brushes. And the light bulb went off in my head. Well, if I just get brushes that are the size of a micron, which is why I tend to ink with like a 0 and a number 2, that those seem to be what I needed to give me the results I wanted. For me, it really does feel like I'm drawing with a pen. And that led me, to the tools that I'm using now. So, but now that I've developed a little bit more control, maybe I'm ready to step up to working with like a sable, like a number 4, like you mentioned. Let's see. Trevor also said, Toth used a cheap marker. Whatever makes good lines on paper. You get some pretty good mileage from cheap tools. Yeah, the only thing that I shudder from is whenever I see people drawing comics with a Sharpie, because I know that those things are gonna, the page is gonna turn yellow. Those things aren't gonna last. I mean, that for me, the cheap tools are simply because I know I'm gonna beat my tools up. I don't think I'm that much of a brush snob, obviously. I mean, even with board, I tend to use whatever. I tend to use Strathmore because I can find it anywhere and purchase it easily. And when they had the Strathmore boards that were that have the comic book lines already printed on them, at first I was in love with those and I was using those all the time. They also helped because they were slightly thinner than regular Strathmore, and they could fit through the printer that I was using at the time for printing my blue lines out. But as time has gone on, I've but I use a slightly different proportion on my pages. Like they aren't exactly 10 by 15 on an 11 by 17 board. And that's because I need more bleed for the editions that I print on Amazon. So I end up making basically my own customized template, and the blue lines printed on the board eventually just felt like they were getting in the way. I need to pay a little bit more attention with these lines. I'm being really sloppy and not paying attention here. I'm just throwing lines on here instead of actually being specific and about my intent. It's giving me bad shapes, bad lines, bad forms. That happens sometimes when I get yapping and I'm not focused. So I want to find that balance here between keeping engaged with you guys and actually getting some good inking done. I realize I have to keep looking up and make sure I'm actually keeping this on the screen. Have this feather out a little bit. So let's see here. Solid Spider Snake is in the chat. Hello. Thanks for stopping by. Happy to have you. Trevor says that the Kolinskis don't really cost that much. I usually get a brush every 5 years or so. That's some great mileage. He says the bristles eventually start to wear down and the lines aren't as crisp. Let's see here. Solid Spider Snake says, what's a Sybil brush? Oh, Sable. I think that's what it is. You're talking about a sable brush. That's what we're talking about is generally brushes are made from hair, from fur. A lot of comic book artists use a sable brush from a mink. It's made, it's the same thing that fur coats are made from, the sable mink coat. They make brushes from that same type of sable hair. So it's not Sybil. It's like the comic book character Silver Sable, S-A-B-L-E, Sable, not Sybil. So the brushes I'm using are synthetic. They're made from, basically it's plastic. It's not even real hair. They're just synthetic fibers that they're making to look like hair. So it's really a difference between using synthetic brush or a natural hair brush. Oh, okay. Trevor already explained all that. I'm sorry. I'm still getting caught up in the chats. Trevor says real sable just seems to get super fine lines, consistent control. The cheaper brushes seem to lose quality quicker. But if you're changing them out that much, yeah, that's true. I use them for me, it's like a new brush every month. So I figure at $2, at $2, I'm going through, in 10 months, I'm going through $20 worth. And I know that a sable brush is less than $20. So I probably should just look at getting at least one sable and trying it out. Solid Snake says, no problem, learning and enjoying from your stream. Well, you're learning from Trevor as well. I mean, that's actually one of the things I love about this community we have, is that there's other comic creators in here that are very knowledgeable, people that I learn stuff from. So it's nice that we're all kind of hanging out here, sharing process, sharing tips, and just enjoying that creative ride together. And I'm went quiet for a minute because I'm sitting here trying to re-engage with the page. I don't usually do warm-up drawing, but that's not because I don't believe in warm-ups. It is simply that I usually don't have any time. My time is so limited in terms of being able to make comics that when I get that opportunity, I just have to sit down and hit the page and go. But there's a certain degree, like I've learned to recognize when I'm butchering a page. And sometimes I'm working and I can see that I'm putting down lines, and the lines may reflect what I have for inks, but they just aren't good. They don't get the subtle refinement that you would hope would be in a comic book page. And when that happens, I try to sort of, it's like meditating, where you sit down, you take a moment, take a deep breath, and just try to relax and re-engage with the page. It's almost like I try to listen to the page and say, all right, what do you need? What does this line need? Where do I need thicker lines and thin lines? Where are my my lines just sort of bunching up? Trying to give myself that that sense of differing values, differing line weights. You know, it might not be. I like having the camera closer to the page, but I feel like I need to move the camera up a little higher so that I can get closer to the page and have a better view of what I'm doing. I need to sort of get into the page. Go, I may slide it in and out. Actually, I need to scoot into the page a little bit, and I realize when I do that, I'm moving the page up higher on my drawing board. So I need to slide that up. Let me run back back up here through the chat questions. Let's see here. Yeah, Amar mentions that brushes are made from horsehair or other animal head, and sable is top of the line. I remember them in college. One gives you mileage if you keep them up. Just like buying cheap markers or more expensive markers like Copics. Solid Snake says, indeed. Let's see here. Just gonna throw that on the screen. Trevor says, Solid Snake, no problem. There's a variety of sable brushes too. The best are Kolinsky because they try to make the point of all the hair face the same direction so the points are consistent. I did not know that about sable brushes. That's a good point. Solid Spider Snake says, I made 3 pages sketch in ink with my team, finished coloring 2 pages and waiting for the shading. Well, that's good. We're making some progress. Trevor says, using a brush is a time taker once you get used to it. And Amar says, I have no space for traditional tools. I'm doing fine with everything digitally. Solid Spider Snake says, same here, doing digital. Amar says, doing things traditionally is only great for collector art. And Solid Snake says, you can say SSZ. I know my name is long. So SSZ. I will try to remember to refer to you as SSZ from now on. You know, it's funny, the thing about going digital. I think I've mentioned this to you guys, that once I finish Morningstar, I'm going to look at making more comics digitally. And I really love traditional inking. And I think that I'm going to switch to doing original art like prints and ink drawings and things that I'm going to sell online, like just original pieces for sale. I think I'm going to continue to do those traditional because I worked so hard to learn how to ink with a brush. It took me years of trying, giving up before I found just the right size tools and having learned how to draw well enough that I could actually control it. That I think was the biggest thing for me, was that I just didn't draw well enough to control the brush. I didn't have the manual dexterity. And I think that along with trying to use the wrong size brush, are probably the biggest hurdles to inking with a brush. But now that I can, I don't want to give up. By the way, I noticed that I'm just cutting through this. I'm probably going to go in there with some whiteout and clean up those lines. But the thing I found when I was doing my layouts for this final issue digitally was that it became really hard to not just finish the page digitally. As I was going along with my layouts, I could see the amount of detail I was putting in, places where I could go in and refine. And I just started seeing it would be very easy to just go ahead and darken my lines, clean them up in the layout stage. And it's almost like my layouts are basically my pencils. And I felt by the time I was done doing those layouts digitally that it would just been so easy to finish it off. And it's about the time saver aspect. That's what I think is leading me to want to at least try digital and see if it makes me any faster. Generally speaking, I do feel that I've been slower than I'd like to be working traditionally, especially this issue. I realized that I put a lot more detail into these pages than I have in the past. And it's really, I don't mind taking a long time with the page. I'm fine with however long it takes to finish is how long it takes. I'd rather have a good page than a fast page. But I also realize that in terms of being able to spend more time doing comics and doing more in the future, at a certain point, I have to learn how to do them faster to make them profitable so that I can justify taking time away from the day job to do more comics. So I want to see if taking advantage of the speed and the time savings that I might get from working digitally will allow me to spend more time doing it. But at the same time, on the other hand, rather, I don't want to let go of traditional inking. So I want to keep that practice up just with my standalone pieces. I'm definitely not anti-traditional because obviously I'm working traditional right now, and I'm not anti-digital. I think that every creator has to find the tools that work best for them. And I thought to myself, digital just for layouts and printing my layouts onto board would be the way to go. And having done that, I find that it was actually pretty useful to do my my layouts digitally and then print them to Bristol. And I like having a finished piece of artwork. But right now, I'm not selling my original pages. I'm probably not going to sell the. I don't plan to hold on to them forever, but I'd rather wait until I can get a decent amount for them, like maybe a few years down the road, hopefully when there's a larger readership for my work, and then sell them, as opposed to selling them for like, $100 now when I could possibly get like $200 or $500 a page, just by waiting until I've produced more work. By the way, I know that I asked at the top of the show, but does the sound quality in terms of how well you guys can hear me, is it about what it usually is? Is it better? Is it worse? Because if I sound much clearer, then I know that this new setup is a good thing. And I will not feel bad about my my desktop computer dying. It's not dead yet, but we'll see. Amar says, if you want to be married to your art or need that hard copy, it's probably the smell of paint and the feel of tools. He said the lighting of your camera is really dark. I can only see the shine from your head. It goes in and out. Yeah, that's something. I don't know what I have to do to my camera to change that setting. And that's the thing. It's like in order to get any light at all, I have to be like right here underneath. I'm not sure what I'm going to have to do to adjust those settings, but it's super dark right now, so I'm gonna have to mess with that. Amar says the weird thing is that all comics comic ends being digital in the end, because unless you're getting plates made for inking and painted pages, said the work may be excellent, but you still have to scan or photograph the final pages at a certain stage. Trevor says secondary markets. Very, very true. I think all of those things are true. And that's one of the reasons why I'm looking into experimenting with the with trying to make comics fully digitally, because it's also possible. Like, I know there are some artists who sell far more prints than they do original artwork. And I could see myself falling into that category.
And if so, I'm fine with the physical, the final object that people are buying being those prints.
In fact, this might sound really nuts to you guys,
but one of the things I'm thinking about experimenting with is making a piece digitally, like just a standalone piece, not a comic. Making a piece digitally, selling it as a print, and if it sells well, then to do a traditional painting or a or ink drawing or some other, doing a traditional media version of a piece that I've already done the print of. So do the print first, see if it's popular and if it's worth me taking the time to recreate it in traditional media. And that might sound putting the cart before the horse. It might sound ass backwards, and maybe it is. But if I can make the piece much quicker than digital, and then it seems like there's a demand for it, then maybe that is the way of deciding, oh, this was worth me taking the time to make the traditional piece, as opposed to making everything traditional, taking longer to do it, and then only having a handful of those traditional pieces sell. So I'm heading basically in next year, in 2021, it's going to be a very experimental year for me. It's going to be experimental in terms of the type of content I'm making. It's going to be experimental in terms of the tools I'm going to use to make them. It's just going to be me just trying a bunch of new stuff and seeing what the universe says. And the reason for that is because I am very capable of sticking to my guns, as me spending a decade to finish an 8-issue series has proven. People have praised me for being my commitment to it. But at the same time, I also look at that as, well, if I had designed this to be like a 2-issue, basically kind of a short story, and then it didn't set the world on fire, I could move on to another series and another series. And having 4 different series over the course of 8 years, maybe one of those would have been, oh, I caught lightning in a bottle. A bunch of people want to read this. I should continue doing more of this series. It's one of those things where there's no way to know whether that's the right way to go. You can look at the fact that with Robert Kirkman's Invincible, that it was on the verge of getting canceled, and I think Robert Kirkman had to beg to Image to let him at least get to issue 12, where they had the big reveal about the main character's father. And it's of 2 different minds. There's no way to know whether you need to just keep doing short series until you find one that hits, and then that's worth doing more of, or whether you need to just do one series long enough to find a fan base. Maybe something where you're not going to find a fan base in 5 issues. Maybe you're not going to find a fan base in 10 issues. You have to do 12 or 15 issues. But 12 or 15 issues is a long time to commit to something without having found your audience. So I'm not saying this in the sense that I have found the right answer or everything I was doing was wrong. It's more that what I have done up till now has not led me to where I wanted to be, which was being able to make a significant income from self-publishing. And mind you, that's also, I have not launched a Kickstarter before. And I'm going to look into doing Kickstarter with new series. It just seemed really weird to me to do a Kickstarter when I'm on the last issue of this series. But my point being is that my original plan was to try and do, a graphic novel a year or a graphic novel every few years, and hopefully have enough of an audience for that work that I could be doing that and then supplemented with part-time work or occasional freelance gigs. And my work just has not, I am proud of the work I've done, and the people who have read it really like it. I've had people at conventions that come back year after year to want to get the next chapter, the next issue, the next volume. But the sales in terms of volume haven't reached the point where I can put more time aside to work on these things. Financially, I just can't do that. That could also be a marketing problem. It could be a problem of not launching a Kickstarter campaign. It could also be I'm just not marketing my books as well as I should be, and that not enough people know about them. Because everyone I give them the pitch, Lucifer's Fall from Heaven told as a Western, when I give them just the pitch, people love it. But it still doesn't mean that I have enough time to do work. See, I see Vince is in the chat. How you doing, Vince? Thanks for popping in. There's a few comments in the chat above that. I want to scroll back and make sure I address. So yeah, Amar says, yeah, I plan or hope to get more out of licensing or producing products, kind of like Todd McFarlane digs. There's not comics. So not unless you have a comic that is just as popular or rare. And Trevor says, no one makes artist editions of digital art. Very, very true. But I am also thinking in terms of, I'm not necessarily that worried about my legacy as a comic creator. And maybe that's a bad thing to say. But I really just want to spend my days making work that I'm passionate about and care about. And for me, making money is not about being rich or being an indie top dog. It is simply a tool. Money to me is just a tool to allow me to spend time doing the things that I want to do. So the idea of making money from my work is simply so I can spend time making the things I care about. The more profitable the things I care about are, the more time I can spend chasing those as opposed to doing things that I don't care about just to bring in money. And, in terms of making artist editions, you're very, very right about that. But that's about leaving a creator's legacy. And in the end, if I spend my life making artwork that I care about, if I don't ever have an artist edition of my work made, that doesn't really bother me. It would be nice to have, but in the end, that's not as important as spending my time doing the things I want to do. And if being able to produce work faster through digital tools allows me to do that, then I would love that. I will take that over having an artist edition. Now that said, in a perfect world, I would be able to do all of that and do traditional art. So if I were faster as a traditional artist, or if I maybe pulled up a body of digital work that I had a library that I could sell, a library that I could monetize. Like, you look at something like Why the Last Man or The Walking Dead. Yes, they were coming out on a regular basis. But now that like Why the Last Man is done, it's a perennial. It's a book that just always, there's be new readers coming in. When the Why the Last Man TV show eventually hits, there'll be a whole new host of readers that will be finding it. If I had a body of work that on itself would just continue to sustain sales, and I didn't have to worry about cranking out at a faster pace, then yeah, who knows? Maybe I would give up digital and go back to doing just traditional work because I really do enjoy this process of ink on paper. For me, I'm more of looking at what's going to get me to doing more work sooner. And right now it's looking like if I keep doing what I'm doing now, I'm going to finish one issue of a series per year. So I am willing to trade off doing traditional work for a while to see if doing work faster really does give me more financial opportunities while controlling my own work. In the end, it may be that comics will always be a hobby and I'll always be working a day job and just making them for fun, in which case it doesn't really matter what tools I make. But I will tell you that having an artist edition, while it would be nice, that is not particularly, it's just not as much of a concern for me. And I think that that's a personal choice. I don't think that every creator
like I think that if somebody does aspire to having if you aspire to having a artist edition of your work collected someday, and if any other creator does, I think that's a good thing to aspire to. But I know at the moment that's not the most important thing for me personally. The most important thing for me personally is, I think, learning how to produce more work faster. And I have tried, and you guys can probably see this if you look at earlier issues of Morningstar. I've tried, like, issue 1, I really took my time and tried to make the best issue I could. Issues 2 and 3, I tried to work as quickly as possible to see what it would be like. Can I work fast enough that I could, if I were working full time, I could do a monthly comic? And I learned that the faster I went, the less satisfied I was with the results. Now, that might also be something that I would just need to man up and develop that skill. Like, maybe I need to work really fast for 5 issues straight and see how there's a drop in quality, and then it slowly starts coming back up again. That said, considering the fact that Morningstar is the one series that I said, if I only ever make this comic, then I'll be a this is the one project I wanted to at least make as a comic creator, having this one series completed. So if I didn't, I'm not saying I'm not going to make anything else, but if I never did make anything else, this would be the one thing. So I don't want to hack out the last issue of this series just to practice speed. I'm going to complete this series, then going forward, all the stuff I do, regardless whether I do traditional or digital, I'm going to try and just work fast and let the chips fall where they may. There's going to be good pages, there's going to be bad pages, there's going to be wonky pages, there's going to be beautiful pages. I'm going to just try and just blow through. But I don't know. Let's see here. A few more comments. Scroll back up. Ooh, a lot of people. I see Sunita's in the chat. Thank you for hopping in. Sunit says, I mean, I generally never find your live stream. Love from India. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate you making time to hang out here while we're drawing. Thank you so much. Let's see here. I think we got the makings of a hot debate here. Amar says artist edition is that a big deal? A notoriety or a novelty thing, which does not mean as much as getting an Eisner or an Emmy or an Oscar for your work, something you worked on. Said chasing awards don't matter. Making money does. You can be broke award-winning artist or a mediocre money-making artist. He said most artists die broke. You know, well, I have to tell you that I see both sides of that argument. Yeah, I see both sides of that argument in the sense that if the only concern is making money, then comics, art in general, and comics in specific are the wrong industry to go into. There are many, many much better ways to make a good living than in comics. And if you honestly, if someone wanted, it's weird when I think back on this now, it would probably make more sense to me to go into banking or engineering or some other field that's high paying, but give yourself enough spare time that you can just, your financial needs are all taken care of, and you can just make whatever you want in your spare time. I think that anyone who goes into artwork is genuinely doing it it's not that you don't care about money, but you have chosen by being an artist to want to do something that you're passionate about, as opposed to just doing something for cash. That does not mean that money's not important to artists. It doesn't mean that you should not be well compensated for your work. I think all artists should keep up their mind on business. But I think that to simply discount the idea of wanting,
Well, I don't think it's necessarily about awards. I think that wanting to have an artist edition it's a sign of the thing that you're passionate about. I don't necessarily look at that as an award, but it's a sign of respect of your peers. I think that that's probably more important, is having a body of work that's significant enough that that people want to study it and look at it. And I think that, to me, is what an artist edition symbolizes. Now, for me, as I mentioned earlier, that's not as important to me, not because I don't want the respect of my peers, but it's literally that I want to spend as much time of the day doing the things I care about. That, to me, is the important thing. So I'm not as concerned about having an artist edition, but for different reasons than Amar. Amar is just saying, do what makes money, get paid. And, the speed and the advantage of working digital seems to be a doorway to that. And even that depends on the artist. Because there's many traditional artists who are very, very fast, very, very skilled, can produce work that is very marketable and can satisfy all of the things that Trevor brings up. Artists that can sell originals, command a high rate for their original pages, draw fast enough that they can work for a mainstream publisher or self-publish, and they produce work that they are proud of and enjoy doing. I think that in a perfect world, that's something that all of us would aspire to. However, my personal scenario, I have not been able to balance all of those things. For me, in order to get the quality I want, I have to draw much slower than I need to. As I mentioned before, I know I'm repeating myself, but for me, the switch to digital is in hopes of being able to produce either the same quality I'm producing now faster, or produce higher quality at the same speed. Now, in a perfect world, I'd get better and faster. Who knows? Let's see. Vince says, I'm cooking, so I have you on in the background as background and inspiration. Amar says, same here. It's nice. We can have this little virtual debate and / conversation. / the inspiration part, I think, is the thing that's most flattering. I always love hearing that because I like listening to other artists talk about their process, preferably while working. So, talking about what motivates us, how we get to what we're doing, get the results we want, the successes, the failures. Those are all fun things to talk about. I'm going to look back up at the chat for a second. I'm just trying to get these teeth right. This is one of those things where the ability to zoom in digitally led me to put in a little bit more detail on these mouths than I can necessarily get. This tooth right here, I'm going to go in there with some white out and turn that into a point because it's all messed up. But this is one of those cases where I zoomed in a little bit too much and put in more detail than I should have. And then when I go in there with a brush to ink it, it's a little bit wonky. So let's see. Trevor says, never be short-sighted about art. Many is the artist that screwed themselves for lack of vision. And Amar says, that sounds better for an artist just starting out in the 20s or 30s. So once you get over 40 or 50, that really does not matter. Well, for me, part of it, that interesting question about artist editions, and I guess in terms of being short-sighted about having a body of work and doing original art, I mean, I'm glad that we have the original art, we have the artist editions that we do. Although I only have a David Mazzucchelli, I don't even have the artist edition. I have the artisan edition, which is the original pages but smaller than the artist editions for David Mazzucchelli and Frank Miller's Daredevil Born Again. I think the artist editions are great. They're a great resource to have to look at and learn from. What's weird is that I honestly think that stuff, when we go to working digitally, doing full digital, and you can actually watch an artist working on their live stream, I think that these live streams, these videos we have now, those are going to become the artist editions, where you can watch the artist make the book as we're we're looking over their shoulder. And I don't think that that's better than having an artist edition. I just think that that's what we're going to see things shift to. I think that things have already begun to shift that way. Yeah, I don't. It's not necessarily having a hill to die on in terms of the debate. I think that there should be artists who work traditional and are always going to work traditional. But I think that there's something to be said for looking and shifting gears if something hasn't been working. See, Sunit says, also thank you for your comic book guides today. I finally completed inking my first ever comic page. 1-page comic. Congratulations. Finishing your first project, your first inked page, there's a certain level of satisfaction, and this goes to Trevor's point, is the satisfaction of having the completed, finished page in front of you. It's so satisfying. And I will tell you, Trevor, when I have a finished piece of digital art, I don't feel that same sense of satisfaction. So that's a good point right there. I think that it's not necessarily that things have to be one way or the other. I mean, who knows? I fully acknowledge that I may spend 5 years making a bunch of digital art and then get to the end of that and say, I wish that I had done all of these traditional. It's very possible. But I have to at least try and see what happens. I mean, I don't have to try. I can keep doing the same thing I've been doing, but I honestly feel that if I keep doing the same thing I have been doing, I'm just going to get the same results. Vince chimes in and says, your body of work is your artist edition in a sense. Amar says, awards get you dust and don't make money, or does nothing if what you do does not make money. Amar says, I don't like Tyler Perry's movies, but he cares less about awards, and his crappy movies make money. So the most important thing is building a solid audience. Once you have established that, then you're set. Having artist editions are like when well-known actors work on low-budget films or indie films in hopes they can win awards, just to have those accolades behind their name. I would say that having an artist edition is sort of like the Criterion Collection edition in DVDs and films when they making a Blu-ray disc of a classic. I think that it's a way to preserve a classic piece of work in the raw format. There would be no artist editions if everything were made digital, because the digital file would be all there is, to Trevor's point. I don't know how that would change the learning process, other than, like I mentioned before, being able to watch the live streams or watching videos of the digital art being created. Let's see. Amar says, if you want accolades, that is great, but that can be something you can chase later. Something later once you have the means to chase that. Solid Snakes at SSZ says, why not both? And I agree, there's no reason not to have both. Amar says, like when I was a teacher, people had added more degrees as an accolade, but that it does not show how great of a teacher they are. Amar says, I'm working on my last of 14 3D models for the cartoon I'm working on. Joseph is there, and he says, funny how your live streams always sync up with me doing commissions. Then again, I do commissions often. So I think it's more of, I just have good timing. You're the one who's being productive and getting stuff done. I just have to pop in when you're doing stuff. Sunit says, okay, guys, I seriously need to sleep. It's 1:35 a.m. I need to wake up at 4:30. I am very sorry to hear that. Please get some rest. The live stream, the replays will always be there, and that's why. I appreciate you making time and catching me here, but yes, sleep and rest is more important. I know for myself, I find it very difficult to get anything done if I'm not getting enough sleep. You know, Amar, I don't know if I'm still catching up on the comments, but I am curious what you think about the idea of going into something non-art related that is very profitable, such that you would not have to depend on comics for money. I mean, what do you think of the idea that there's far better ways to make money than comics or artwork, and to make a career in some other field and then make art purely for pleasure? What do you think about that versus tailoring your art to the market? Do you think that's a reasonable approach? And if not, you know, I'm curious about, you know, just what your thoughts on that are. You may have already answered that in the chat. That's why I phrased the question the way I did, because as I go back and take a look, you may have already comments, because I keep stopping to draw a little bit more, because I also feel like, you know, I'm actually really curious what it would be like if you guys just sat here and just listen to me talk and I'm not drawing anything. I know that there's some people like my buddy Scott Circlin from Circworks. If you guys ever watch his channel, a lot of times he'll be on talking while the video's playing. And I could possibly do something where I pre-record me drawing and then just play that while I'm answering questions. Because I don't find it too distracting to talk while I'm inking. For me, it's just stopping to look up and read the chat. Maybe 2021 will be the year I get a mod to read chat responses while I'm working. We'll see. Just inking in these pec muscles here. Okay. Joseph asks, Jeremy, can you elaborate on your process? After thumbnailing, you sketch, then scan the sketch, right? Then you print out the sketch so you can barely see it, and then you ink and scan that, right? That is pretty much correct. I've got a bunch of pre-printed boards here ready for me to ink. Let me grab one from my wall. So first, I draw tons of thumbnails, which, here, let me scoot this over. We will get, guys, I will continue to look into we'll continue to discuss the debate about the digital versus traditional, but I'm gonna dive in for a few minutes to Joseph's question, and then I'll come back to the comments and catch up. And after I catch up with that, we might be done. But the truth is, I actually feel like inking some more. So I may just ink for a little while you guys are hanging out. Well, we'll see. Let me get to the question. So Joseph, right here, I've got a big stack. These are all of the thumbnails for a 40-page comic. So several pages of them. I will end up sketching out like multiple versions of the same page, trying to work out how I want the story to flow. And it's just stick figures and different panel compositions. It's me trying to figure out what shot do I want to be the largest shot? Do I want them to be even, different sizes, moving a panel to a different page? So it's a lot about, this is all about working out my pacing and storytelling. Once I complete this for an entire issue, and I try to work out the whole issue in thumbnails first, some people do a thumbnail as they do each page, or some people just work out the page on the Bristol board. There is no right way to do it. I'm just more of a planner. If it works well for someone to plan out each page as they go and skip thumbnails, or if people do a thumbnail and then start the page and then do a thumbnail and do the next page, everyone is different and everyone needs to find what works best for them. So I do my thumbnails for the whole issue. Once I complete the whole issue, I do my layouts. These are drawn digitally on the computer and they're in black and white. You can very faintly see, here's an angel who's sort of shooting over his shoulder. He's being chased by a bunch of demons. And then one of the demons catches him. This is all very, very faint and hard for you guys to see digitally. In real life, it's like non-photo blue. Like if you look at the pre-printed comic book boards that have panels already printed out, that's about what level of lightness this is. So I can see it clearly enough that I can ink it, but when I scan them in, it kind of disappears. I mean, I just adjust the levels a little bit or adjust the curves and they drop out. Once I have drawn these, then I enlarge them, you know, I print them out. These are black and white when I originally draw them digitally. And then me making them light non-photo blue, that's just something I do really quick in Procreate. I just throw a layer on top of them in Procreate in vivid light, and it's a light blue. And then I put another layer of white on it, and then that's solid, and I drop it to like 90, 85% opacity. And that's why I get this very light blue that I print out. And that is what I ink. So it used to be that I did my layouts on vellum so I could flip the pages instead of putting them on a light box, because the light box started hurting my eyes. For some reason, it doesn't hurt my eyes to look at an iPad. So that's one of the reasons why I switched to do my layouts digitally as well, is because of that. And that gets you to the process we're at now. At this point, I just finish all the pages. I scan them in. I've already done my lettering. I add the lettering on top of the page. I do my gray tones first. I scan this in, and then I'm going to gray tone it all. I used to gray tone it in Photoshop. Then I switched to gray toning it in Affinity Photo. Now I'm gray toning them in Procreate. So I add my gray tones, then I slap my letters on top, then I have my book I send off to the printer. So that is the process. If you have more questions following up on that, let me know in the chat. Let's scroll back up because it looks like this conversation is hot. I almost wish that this would be one where it really would be nice to have everyone verbally chatting, live streaming, having a conversation, because there's so much of an interesting conversation going on here. Let's see here. You know, this is something I would actually, I know I've had Amar on the live stream a couple of times. Trevor, if there's ever a point in the future where you'd like to be on the live stream, maybe we can schedule it one time. Maybe you have you on as a guest. And for a while now, I've been wanting to have Amar and Vince on together because I know they would have a very interesting conversation. So it might be nice sometimes to have like a short roundtable conversation with a bunch of y'all where we can talk about a bunch of different topics. So Sanit finally said good night. I hope he gets some rest. Said take care, everyone. That's one I definitely want to spotlight. He says, take care, everyone. These art communities always pump me up to create more art. Bye bye. So that's great. That's the thing I really want everyone to take out of this is feeling more energetic and doing stuff. So Amar says, well, I work in IT, but if I have my choice, I prefer to have the comic be supplemental to a game or animated live action. Oh, Sunit also says, thank you. He says, also don't forget to like and sub. He's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Guys, definitely like the videos, sub to the channel. Let's see. Amar says, if I had my choice, I preferred the comic to be supplemental to a game or animated live action movie because that is what I see. That is what I see what I work on as anyway, or I desire for them. Trevor says, digital lends itself to the product. That's fine. I'm not anti-money, but art is about quality. Making quality art is putting your best work out and hoping an audience agrees with you. Sunit says 40 pages. Believe me, I did not intend to do a 40-page comic. I wrote this to be 24 pages, just like every issue. I said too much I wanted to cram in there. Yeah, Trevor, the idea of digital lending to its product, making art is about putting your best work out, hoping the audience agrees with you. I agree with that statement. I think that there's a hard balance
and it really is an individual person in terms of, I think for most creators, you're trying to balance creativity with commerce. I think there are people who are making creativity and they're purely commerce minded, and there are people that are creativity and they're not commerce minded at all and are simply just, I have an artistic expression I want to put out into the world. I think that artists in general and comic creators in specific tend to skew more towards artistic expression and hoping it finds an audience versus being marketable. And that's one of the reasons why I actually like Amar's point of view. The reason why I like Amar's point of view is, while I don't necessarily share it, I think that if artists are more financially successful and are more business minded, they'll be able to control more of their content. And if they're able to control more of their content, they have more freedom over what they do and don't make and how they make it. And again, that's, if I completely disagree with Amar, I wouldn't be looking into making my comic completely digitally. So I'm definitely looking into that. So it means that I'm taking the points he's putting out there very seriously. I would say that my heart, Trevor, you have my heart, Amar has my brain. Between the two of you, it's like having an angel and devil on one side of each shoulder. I really do agree with both of you. And that sounds being wishy-washy and waffling. It's me walking a creative line. And I think that Morningstar has been me following the path more of making art that I care about and hoping it finds an audience. And after spending a decade doing that, I'm going to put on more of a business hat and see what happens if I make art with more of a business mind. And it may be that what I'm hoping, I would hope that trying it with a business mind will make it more financially viable enough that I can do so what some filmmakers do, where you make one movie for the studio and then you make one movie for yourself. That might be the approach I end up making. And I think that as independent artists and independent creatives, that's honestly a challenge that we always will battle out. Let's see. Amar says more artists more about completion, getting your artists more about completion and getting your work out versus worrying about your best work, because based on the barometer you set, your best work will hinder your production workflow. Now, see, that's the interesting thing. I can very much say that in order to do work that I really care about, I have to work much slower than is profitable. And I don't even mean profitable like, oh, I'm making a ton of money. I mean, it's so slow that it's almost like I'm paying people to read my comics versus cranking work out and making profit from it. I'm taking money away from things that I could be doing that would make more money just to do this thing that I care about. So that's something that I think is kind of significant for me. And Amar says your thumbnails that should go into your artist edition. This is something, I don't think I've mentioned it. I may have mentioned it once or twice on my channel here, but Kickstarters. I didn't want to start a Kickstarter and then do an issue and then start another Kickstarter, do an issue, and then not do a Kickstarter for 2 or 3 years and then do another issue. Much like it takes me a long time to finish each issue, the amount of time it takes to properly execute a Kickstarter campaign and fulfill it, I didn't want to have that slow down the production of the comic. After I finish this 8th issue, I'm going to publish this issue the way I always have. Then I'm going to publish a volume 2, just like I published volume 1 of the comic. Once that's done, what I plan to do is redo all of Morningstar as what I'm going to call it not an artist edition, I'm going to call it a process edition. What the process edition is going to be is it's going to be about the size of a graphic novel. And it's going to have I'm going to start with issue 1, see how it does. If it does well, then I'll do issue 2 and I'll do the whole series. But it'll have all 24 pages of the comic in issue 1. Then I will put in all of my thumbnails, which is probably about 30 odd pages. The script for issue 1, I don't know whether I'm going to put all of the layouts, because I don't know if the layouts are necessarily
as entertaining to people or what they want to see, maybe that'll be a stretch goal. But the idea will be thumbnails, script, thumbnails, the original book, plus additional sketches. So that's going to be like a process edition to show basically how I made the comic. I'm going to do that for each issue. And I imagine that each one of those will run, just roughly off the top of my head, anywhere from 70 to 100 pages for each issue. Like I can tell you for this alone, for the 40 pages of comic, I probably have a stack of 30 pages of thumbnails for a 40-page comic. Because there's some pages where it took me 4 pages to work out, 4 pages of paper to work out one particular page because it was complicated. So I do intend to make a process edition sometime in the next year or two. I'm going to start publishing those on Kickstarter, and the idea will be, since the whole series is done, the only thing that I need to worry about is funding and fulfillment. So that's a plan I've got for that. Now I've really fallen behind on conversations because I can tell that just we've been going for a bit, me talking for a while. Let me scroll back up. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Amar says, oh, and this is talking about doing your best work, and it's slowing down. Let me pick up what he said before. What he was saying before, what I already put on the screen was doing your best work will hinder your production workflow. And then he says, which can cause frustration and other issues depending on the artist. Also, one's best work in all based on interpretation. Most artists will never put out their best work just because the best version of their work can complete at that moment in time. I'm not sure if I'm reading this properly. I don't know if it's just autocorrect is messing it up. Let's see. Vince says Mikey Mega usually does a weekly stream where he takes a Twitch stream of his answers and comments. Where he takes a Twitch stream of his and answers the comments made below the previous week's video. It works. That is something to look at. All right, I'll take that into advisement, Vince. Thanks. I personally, one of the things I like about doing this live is the conversation in the back and forth. So let's see here. Trevor says product is more about completion, art is about your best work. Art is admittedly showing off. No one gets excited to see the new Bill, Gavin, Jobber, Archie pages. Miller pages are always a treat. And then Amar says, yeah, it's about interpretation. Oh, yeah, in terms of, yeah, Trevor just messaged me that we're referring to me wanting to have him on the channel sometime. So I will definitely follow you up on that. Let's see, Amar says, I've never been an artist fanboy. I'm more of a fan of art in general. No artist I care for, but I love the medium itself. Amar says there's no interpretation about me trying to be the best. Others may find it subpar. I'll know I dashed it out. That is very true. I have pages that I have a hard time looking at because I just know it's not even about them being my best. It's about me having a plateau that I never want to fall beneath. I want to have a certain level of consistency. Whenever my work falls below that, it drives me bonkers. Trevor says there's a happy middle ground in comics. Quality will always sell. Amar says exactly my point. Joseph says, once you publish your work through Amazon KDP, is it Amazon exclusive or are you allowed to sell your graphic novel elsewhere? Amazon KDP is my go-to once I finish my graphic novel. When you put a book on Amazon KDP, the print version, I think you can sell that. You would have to reformat and upload it to any other platform. I think you can sell that immediately. The digital version, however, must be exclusive to Amazon for 90 days. So that you do have exclusivity there for that period of time, and after that 90 days, you can put it on Kindle, not Kindle. You can put it on Apple Books, any other digital platform, Drive Through Comics, any other place you want to sell it. You can put that out as well. And Kindle owns Comixology, so that's one place where you can actually put it out on Comixology before you put it on KDP, and there shouldn't be any conflicts or problems there. Because I know that sometimes I will look up books. I don't know if my individual issues show up when you search for them, but I know that I've seen other comics that that show up on Amazon that are Comixology titles. So yeah, there's a period of exclusivity, 90 days, and then you are good to go. You can see, and Trevor says, I think Amar is dead right in many respects. An artist that makes art for himself is pointless. And then Amar says, no, I've been an artist over 45. This isn't saying no to him. I think this is talking about, I think in the question I was at, this is, I think, in response to the question I was asking about doing something completely different from art and then being able to make whatever artwork you want without any financial concerns. And Amar says, no, I've been an artist over 98% of my life, which means over 45 years. You know, I've felt and been an artist, but I've never been an artist professional. If I took the approach not to think as an artist, but to do what was needed to make art that people would buy, I would be doing art full time. But more so recently, it took me a long time to come to this point, so my head was too hard for decades, being stubborn as an artist, seeking perfection, and wanting to do a masterpiece of art. That got me nowhere. But in the past 2 years, I've done more than the past 20 or so of effort. SSZ says, cool. He says, I'm thinking of putting my comic on Amazon once I finish. Say, you get 3 for 1 since they are all owned by Amazon. Yes, Comixology, KDP, and Amazon owns both of those. And I will tell you, the people who are watching, I appreciate those who have picked up either digital copies or physical copies, because I do see, like, every week I get a little notification that a few more copies of sometimes digital ones, sometimes physical ones. Oddly enough, I get a lot of people buying Morningstar that are in the UK. So thank you. Thanks, mates. But yeah, so just the fact that people are watching, and I feel like it's mentioning that the books are available on these other platforms, that when I mentioned on the live stream that I always get a few more sales every week just from that. So I do appreciate the people that are watching and that are supporting my work through that as well. At the same time, I also feel sort of like it bums me out that I'm not fast enough to make something that is viable for the direct market. Because I don't feel like comic shops owe me a shot at carrying my indie book. I feel like I have to prove myself as a viable investment for retailers because, their budgets are so limited. I've talked about this before on the channel, but I understand that retailers have very limited budgets. And as much as they actually genuinely, I think most comic shops really are, I think the owners are pro indie comics, but they have to carry what they know will sell. And Marvel and DC ends up being the bulk of that. And so the only way I feel like it's worth it for me to ask a retailer to take a chance on my book is if I can deliver not just a quality comic, because I do feel like I can deliver a quality comic, but to be able to deliver it on a regular basis. Whether it's a monthly issue, a bi-monthly issue, quarterly, one graphic novel per year, I feel like I have to get to the point where I can produce work on some sort of consistent marketing schedule that a retailer can say, all right, if you're going to have this amount of work and you're going to produce it this frequently and you're going to be consistent about that, and they like the work and believes their store's clientele will buy it, then they can say, all right, I can get behind you. But right now, the fact that I can't predict how often I can produce work other than at least one issue a year, which this is the first year, 2020 is the first year that I have not completed an issue. Part of that is because I took a break to do some standalone art pieces. Part of that is also because this issue is a double-sized issue. But with those two things, you know, going hand in hand, I have not produced work at the pace that I'm producing work even slower than at a pace that I don't think a retailer could support. So I think about that whenever I'm, you know, pimping out my work on these other platforms, that I want physical comic shops to still exist. And I feel actually a lot of guilt about not driving my audience to local shops, but it's because, you know, I have to produce work that is going to be profitable for local shops. The quality may be there, the speed is not there, and speed, you know, the frequency of publishing is part of the marketing. It is. Because sometimes, you know, not only do you need to make people, you have to both be able to make people aware of the work, that's the marketing, but that marketing schedule dictates, you know, I think the popularity of a work. Being able to tell people, okay, if you read this and if the retailer took a chance on something and they sell to their audience and their audience likes it, their audience takes a chance on it, and they said, I like your recommendation. When's the next issue coming out? When's the next volume coming out? And all the retailer can say is, I don't know. I can't ask a retailer to take that risk. And I think most retailers probably wouldn't take that risk. Some retailers will do that they can afford to take a chance every once in a while on some local artists. I mean, like I said, a lot of retailers really do want to support their local comic creators. I'll tell you, I listened to the podcast of Contest of Challengers, and it's the guys that own Challengers Comics in Chicago. And it's a great podcast for really understanding what things are from a comic retailer's side. And they love indie creators. They really are super supportive of it. But you got to make it easier for them to sell the work. And I recognize that the speed, the frequency of my publication schedule right now it's an uphill battle for a retailer. And I guess I'm telling you all this to assuage my own personal guilt at stabbing the retailers in the back, which I feel like every time I tell people, go buy my shit from Amazon. I mean, Amazon doesn't care if I tell people, go to this local shop, go to that local shop. Amazon's like, look, if the algorithm shows the work to people and then people buy it, we'll show it to more people. That's all they really care about. They could give a rat's ass. They are not hurt by me directing people or not directing people. Whereas comic retailers, the people who work at Amazon are flesh and blood, but it's not like the comics retail market. It's not like, you know, those local shops that we went to that were like our home away from home when we were kids, when we first got into comics, or even as teenagers or college kids, or whenever you discovered comics. It's not the same. And honestly, I don't go to my local shops as much anymore because I have so many books that I haven't read yet. Like my pile of unread books is ridiculous. I've got like older books. Like I've mentioned this before. I've got most of Will Eisner's library that was reprinted by DC Vertigo. And I've only read probably about half of them. The fact that I have unread Will Eisner graphic novels in my library sitting on my shelf right over there, that's a crime. I should make time for it. But, you know, that's one of the other curses of being an artist is that the time it takes to create ends up eating up a lot of that time that you would spend enjoying things. So I try to, you know, spend maybe a half hour a night reading. I'm reading a collection of old Al Williams EC comics. It's the 50 for 50 collection. They're I think it was Dark Horse was reprinting a library of them.
EC creators, and the Al Williamson one was one that I'd always heard of him as a great inker and a great artist, but I'd never read any of his work. So I thought, let me just get a collection of his work to read. So let's see here. We go back here into the comments. So let's see here. SSZ says, make Morningstar British now. Maybe it could be a nice BBC series, although I don't know how the British Old West series would work. Amar says, what is that podcast again? Chicago is in my neck of the woods. The podcast is called Contest of Challengers. And if you just look up that comic book shop, Challengers Comics and Conversation, they should have a link to their podcast on their website. But it's a great podcast. It's just listening to these two comic book retail owners, and you hear the ups and downs, the good and bad, their frustration with certain books, the marketing of certain companies. You hear them praise indie books they love. You hear them praise mainstream books, Marvel and DC books that they really love, and different creators. They talk about the good, the bad, and they just give you the same way that I'm just showing you my day-to-day of making comics, and just you're looking over my shoulder as I make it. That's kind of what the podcast is they just talk about the day-to-day of running a comic book retail shop. And it's a fantastic insight. I definitely recommend you guys checking it out. If you're interested in making comics, I think it's great to hear, even if you're somebody who's just doing web comics, or you're doing something that's not going to be mainstream at all, you're not trying to get into retail, because they talk about how comic books are sold and how to appeal to new readers. And in the mainstream market, the retailer is the customer, because they're the ones who are actually placing the orders. And yeah, they're placing it on pre-orders from people that have pull lists and from customers who show interest. But in the end, they're the ones who are deciding what books even make it onto the shelves in order to sell to people in the first place. And they're the ones that are hand selling and upselling titles to readers. So it's great just from a marketing standpoint. But yeah, definitely check that show out. Trevor says Eisner is a huge chunk of time. He also says Al Williams' Flash Gordon is amazing. Yeah, see, that's mostly what I'd heard about Williamson from is Flash Gordon, but also knowing that he's both drawn a bunch of EC titles and he's inked other creators. I think there's a story in the collection that I think he inks a Frazetta comic story. There's a few other creators that he collaborates with in the series, but most of it is Al Williams, and I'm definitely enjoying that. And Trevor also says competing for that shelf space. Yeah, that's a big problem in terms of getting your books onto the shelves at a comic shop. There's Marvel and DC. Part of their publishing a lot of books is their business strategy. They want to keep those shelves full. They want the shelves to be full of just their books. And I think that's more about the battle between Marvel and DC than it is about wanting to knock out indie creators. Unfortunately, a lot of indie creators are also, coming out from Image or Boom Studios or Dynamite, various other publishers. So I think indie creators do get hurt by that. But I think that really that's about the battle between Marvel and DC. And also, speaking of me not reading as many books as I used to, part of me reading fewer books is that nowadays when I get new comics, this is really going to drive y'all up the wall. I've been reading more digital comics now because I am out of physical space. My wife and I have one room in the house that really is considered our library, and it's got bookshelves from floor to ceiling all the way around the entire room. And that room is full. We already have books sitting on top of shelves. So like the bookshelf is full, and then we'll have books sitting on top of those, like stacks of them. The books are already spilling over on our bookshelf. Plus, that doesn't count the bookshelf that I have by my nightstand. Doesn't count the bookshelves. I've got
I've got 3 bookshelves in this studio room that have reference books that I use the most. I'm at the point now where in order to buy a new comic or a new art book, I actually have to really seriously look at my shelf and say, what can I get rid of? What do I no longer need anymore? Can I give this away to Goodwill? Can I give it away to a friend? I prefer physical books just like anyone else. But these days, unless it's something that I'm willing to give up one of my existing books for, I am likely to buy the digital version of it just so because I don't have space for any new books. And that, again, in my mind, is a betrayal to the direct market. It's a betrayal to the local comic shops. For a while, I was doing something where I would buy single issue comics and then I would just read them and give them away to friends. So I was at least buying stuff from my local shop. But then I just got to the point where I'm like, I don't even have time to read the books that I'm buying. And that was probably over 5 years ago that I got to that point where I just couldn't keep up. So I've got just a ton read yet, and now more likely to buy something digital, not because I prefer the digital reading experience, but because I don't want to get rid of the books that I already have. I'm just out of room. And I think that that's also an interesting thing that happens is people, comic fans, comic readers, get to that point where they reach they're at capacity. They don't have room for any more books. And I'm kind of like that now. It's like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead over here, except with comics. When all of hell is full, the dead will walk the earth. It's like when all of my bookshelves are full, I will start reading digital. That's kind of what's happened. Fortunately, I've got an iPad Pro, and the digital reading experience is a lot more pleasant on that device. It really does look beautiful. I lament double page spreads because those don't read well digital. But I'd heard, I think it was Gabriel Hardman on Word Balloon podcast, and he was talking about digital versus print, and he said something interesting that I had not thought about, which was normally you read a spread and then you turn the page and you get that sense of pacing of like what's going to happen next. Each page turn is like a reveal. When you're reading digital, you lose the double page spread, but he'd much rather give up the double page spread to have every single page have a reveal to it. And that is an interesting twist in terms of pacing. I have not worked digital enough yet to really feel like I'm taking advantage of that, but it's something interesting to think about. I think I'm going to catch up on these last few comments here in the chat, and then we're going to wrap it up because we've been going for over 90 minutes now. This has been a really fun Jag, and I've been enjoying working on this page, but also I do need to just shut up and sit here and finish inking this page. Let's see here. Trevor mentioned that Al Williamson did a ton of Star Wars work too, which I think they've definitely been collected. I don't know if they've been collected in artist editions, but I know that there's a nice collection of those out. Amar says DC may not be being in that market much longer since AT&T bought them. It's like, yes, very true. But that's unfortunate. We'll see how that all shakes out. I mean, who knows? A lot of people have talked about the idea that Time Warner may end up licensing out the DC titles to, like, maybe to Marvel, maybe to IDW or Dynamite, some other company. They might be licensing out Superman, Batman, all those other books, and they just make the movies and own the media property. Trevor says it's time to get a bigger house in terms of the bookshelf. If it were only that easy. Amar says, I have no house or choose not to have one. So living in an apartment, I don't have the room. So when I buy a comic hard copy, it's more for support, but I prefer to buy digital. Joseph says, you'll agree that story is more important than art. Even if your art is garbage, the story is great. You're out of the woods, right? I mean, look at Rob Liefeld, Liefeld's Atrocious Anatomy. First off, I really like Rob Liefeld's art. Is the anatomy the best? No. But he has energy in his comics. Rob Liefeld is no Jack Kirby.
But what Jack Kirby, the main thing that is his selling point, Jack Kirby does actually draw beautiful art, but a lot of the reprints that have been out in the 80s and 90s didn't really reflect that. We have much better reprints of Kirby's work now that really show how beautiful his draftsmanship is. They have books out that are showing Kirby's pencils. But what really draws people in is the dynamics, so the energy on the page. And I would say that while Rob Liefeld isn't the draftsman that Kirby is by any degree, he has the energy. That energy is what brings people in. And yes, the muscles all look like they're swollen like balloons, but that's also part of the energy. It's like the characters are rippling up and tense. I would say that Liefeld's work reminds me of more of Byrne Hogarth. Like, a lot of people criticize Hogarth and Dynamic Anatomy because it looks like all the muscles are flexed at once. And Hogarth is doing that intentionally to make all those muscles clear. But I understand the criticism that that's not really how the muscles look, and that that exaggeration is a poor thing to base instruction upon. I understand that criticism, and I think that criticism pours over on Liefeld's draftsmanship in the same way, in that, yeah, the muscles aren't necessarily doing what all the anatomy should really be doing, but his work has an energy and a dynamics to it that is very enjoyable, and that's the reason why I think a lot of people do love his work, in spite of artists criticizing his anatomy. I'm not going to say his anatomy is the best, but I'm saying that I see the value in his work. I see why people love his work, and I actually enjoy his work too. And I enjoy it for the feeling it gives, not necessarily the draftsmanship. Let's see. Amar says, great art won't carry a bad story, but great story will fall for bad art. Joseph says the same, and just like in video games or movies, also great, let's see, video games or movies can have great art also added later during repackaging. Amar says story is the key for me. Amar, Trevor says to Amar and Joseph, I can't agree with that. Shaolin Cowboy. See, this is interesting because I just had a conversation with a friend about Shaolin Cowboy. My buddy Carl Altstetter, we were talking offline privately, and I enjoyed the first Shaolin Cowboy volume, but I read the second one, the Shrimp. It's not Shrimp Buffet. I can't remember the title, but it's got a weird title to it, and it's buffet in it. But the one where he's just fighting zombies, and I have to tell you, it was beautiful, and I read every single page of that, and when I was done, I gave it away because it is a beautiful book, but I'm like, I do need some story. And I think that the idea of that, if there was a minimal, like for instance, the very first Shaolin Cowboy series does have a story to it. And I think that his art is beautiful enough to carry a very thin story. I don't think that it's enough to carry zero story, which I feel like the second Shaolin Cowboy series, if it had just been a one-shot, 24 pages of him just fighting zombies, I would have been cool with that. I would have said, all right, this is a cool, interesting art piece. It's an interesting artifact. The fact that it's 4 issues of one continuous fight scene with no plot, I respect Jeff Darrow as a creator. I think the art was beautiful. I'm never going to read that book again. I'm going to go back. I'm going to read the first Shaolin Cowboy. I'm going to go back. I'm going to read Hard Boiled. Even Hard Boiled, Frank Miller's a great writer. The story in Hard Boiled is thin. I love Frank Miller, but that thing really hangs together on Jeff Darrow's art. So I've definitely read comics that did not have great artwork, but I really enjoyed the story. I think if you give me a book that has great artwork but no story, I would rather have an art book by that artist. Like, I would much rather have a Jeff Darrow sketchbook than that second Shaolin Cowboy volume. That is a personal opinion. I think that it's depends on how much of a reader you are versus an art collector. I think that there are people who read books and only are buying it for the art and don't really care about the story. There are people who are only reading it for the story and care about the art. There are people who need and want both. And here's my thing. I think that there are enough comic books out there that have great art and great story that you should not have to choose. I think that that's the thing. There are books out there that I think that have artistic merit, that have great art and poor stories. I think there are books that have artistic merit that have poor art and great stories. There are enough comic books that have both out there that I think that those should be the ones that are at the top of the list. Like, for instance, I don't know if you've ever read David Mack's Kabuki series. The entire series has great artwork and great story. The final volume of it, Alchemy, I think it's a meditation on creativity and art and finding purpose in making art. That book is a masterpiece. That book is a masterpiece right up there with any Will Eisner volume, any of Frank Miller's works. I love David Mack as an artist. That one particular volume is the finest piece of work I think I've ever seen him create. And I think it should be held in the same high regard as something like Dave McKean's Cages, or Alan Moore, or see, Watchmen's. I know what comparing anything to Watchmen is real. That's a third rail, but that particular volume I think is a transcendent piece of art beyond just being a great comic book. So David Mack, The Alchemy, definitely check that book out if you hadn't. All right, I got to wrap this up, hit these last couple of comments, and I got to get off here. All right. Amar says, great character building and development and pacing. Most movies nowadays, there is nothing but great art and no story. Well, I think most movies are crappy. They're not really that great. SSZ says, thanks, ta-ta for now, which I know you said that a while ago because I said I was getting off a while ago, but now we're really wrapping things up. All right. Let's see. SS Snake also says, is self-taught, but still those anatomy. I'm not sure if I understand what the question is, or if it's a statement, or if you're just saying that you're self-taught, but or whether we're talking about Liefeld or not. Wait, what was the Liefeld comment up there? Blah, blah, blah. Challenge, story is the key, repackaging, video games. Amar says, everyone is self-taught as an artist. Hogarth knew anatomy, Liefeld didn't. I mean, I've looked at his work, and Liefeld's work, he draws the muscles in the right places. They're just bulging and distorted. But I think that he's exaggerating or cartooning anatomy. Again, I'm not going to tell you that he's the best draftsman. I'm not going to tell you that he's like Mark Schultz, who draws a beautiful anatomy. I'm just saying to say that there's no anatomy whatsoever in Liefeld. Yes, he's got muscles that are made up. He's also got muscles that are way oversized and distorted. I think that exaggerating and cartooning anatomy is different from having no sense of anatomy whatsoever. Joseph says, let me say what everyone here is thinking. That cat profile drawing with the pecs that want to explode. SSZ says he didn't have an education in art or art school. Amar says you can learn from Hogarth, but not from Liefeld unless you want to draw bad art or a lot of pouches. Well, I don't think that anyone should learn to draw anatomy from comic books, because comic book creators constantly have to take shortcuts to get work done. I don't think people should learn anatomy from drawing my art. I'm studying anatomy all the time. I would never tell someone, look at my artwork to learn anatomy. Even though I've got, the pec muscles here, I've got the muscles, the ab muscles running down, I've drawn in the serratus muscles up here and the external obliques. I've drawn all the muscles on here. I would still not tell someone, look at my drawings to study anatomy. Study from an anatomy book, study from Loomis, study from Bridgman, study from Scott Peck, study from Elliot Goldfinger. I don't have a Goldfinger book, but I've looked at them. That's where you learn anatomy from. You don't learn anatomy from comics. I think is probably a bad idea. Look at comic books for storytelling. also look at film for storytelling and photography. Let's see here. SSZ said to Joseph that she read our minds. Trevor says Rusty and Big Guy was too thin. Oh, it says it was thin too. Yeah, in terms of the story. Yes, very true. That's the thing. I think that Jeff Darrow in specific, his work is so beautiful, it can carry a thin story. And I think that most of his work falls in that category. I think that beautiful art can carry thin story. I don't think beautiful art can carry no story unless it is intentionally an art book or a sketchbook and not a narrative experience. That's just personal opinion. I think that there's room for debate on that. I'm trying to think of what else, because I'll tell you, I love Ashley Wood as an artist. Popbot is a great story. Popbot is a great read. The story is definitely shaky. There is some stuff of his I've read. I continue to be a fan of him. I love him, but I would rather just see a bunch. There's some stories I've read that I would rather just see a cool picture, because I don't know if the story necessarily is compelling or makes complete sense. But it depends on the project he's working on. Let's see. Trevor says, it's why I didn't get into Sandman stuff. A lot of the art was hot garbage. There's some artists in Sandman who I didn't appreciate at the time. There's some stuff that I came into later. I mean, don't forget, Sam Keith drew the first volume of Sandman. Kelly Jones drew what is arguably my favorite Sandman volume, the Season of Mist, which if you just read Seasons of Mist by itself, it'll make you want to read the rest of the series, even if you don't like the art, because it's such a good story and you get hooked. That's a place where I do think that strong story overcomes the art. But I got it. But also when I started with that series, it was two great artists, Sam Keith and Kelly Jones. So again, the art did bring me in. I think that there's a reason why we're debating this is because there's not a clear-cut answer. I think that there's room for debate. Joseph says, any comic book with Indiana Jones-like themes would you recommend? I mean, puzzles, treasures, stuff, National Treasure-themed comic books or graphic novels. I don't know about the puzzles, but in terms of pulpy adventure comics, I would definitely throw out Mark Schultz. He has a comic book called Xenozoic Tales. It's more properly known as Cadillacs and Dinosaurs because they made a Saturday morning cartoon with that title. So they sort of branded it as Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, but the actual proper name of the book is Xenozoic Tales. Mark Schultz does some great pulpy adventure stuff. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't think of any other explory. Oh, well, see, that's a problem. When I think of pulp adventure, it's not necessarily the puzzles. I'll think of stuff like Steve Canyon, which is very military themed. It's a great adventure series. But the comic strip that Milton Caniff did before that, Terry and the Pirates, that is definitely Indiana Jones type adventure. I am sure that there are some contemporary adventure pulp comics out there. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Trevor throws out The Rocketeer. See? Right there, right off the top of my head. The Rocketeer is great. That's high adventure pulp. That also reminds me of The Shadow, which is crime. It's crime pulp, but it's still pulp comic books. So anything from that era. But there's, those are some comments right off the top that are worth checking out. Trevor also says Bravo for Adventure by Toth. I need to get a collection of Bravo for Adventure. I've got a few Toth comics, but I don't have any Bravo for Adventure, and I need to check that out because I do love Toth's work. You got some great comments there. All right, guys, we've been going for a long time. We're gonna wrap it up here. Amar throws out Doc Samson. Yes, Doc Samson's another or you mean Doc Savage? I think is what you meant. Doc Savage. I know what you meant. Doc Savage. Yes, he is the pulp. But I don't know if there's any Doc Savage comic books. I'm sure that there have been over the years. I don't know if they're making any contemporary ones. But yeah, Doc Savage would be another one. So let us wrap things up here. Let me tell you again, I appreciate your support. If you would like to get additional bonus live stream, we still got at least one more art book study group on Patreon this month. Go to patreon.com/GERIMI. You get to see all of my finished comic book pages as I complete them. I post them on Patreon. I post work in progress images that I don't post on social media. We've got a bonus live stream. You can read all of Morningstar up till now on Patreon for the subscription. All of the complete issues 1 through 7 are already up there. So you can go and definitely check that out there. You can sign up for my newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. That'll let you know whenever I have new artwork on sale, sketches, prints. I post links to these live streams if you miss them in there. I also post social media blog posts, just little odds and ends about what I'm up to each month. Sort of a small just touch and base with everybody. And again, as I mentioned before, amazon.jeremy.net. You can get volume 1 of Morningstar, This First Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. You can get my previous graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he can't control. Those are available there. And I am grateful for the time that you spent with me, hanging out, talking, chatting. I went extra long just because you guys are worth it, and it's fun to hang out and talk with you. So thanks so much. Amar says, thanks for the stream. I completed another 3D model during this live stream. Glad to keep you company while you're on the grind. I appreciate it, man. You are one hard-working artist. I love it. Trevor, thanks so much. Peace out. I'm going to reach out to you about getting you on the stream at some point next year. So like I said, it's going to be the last stream for the year. I'm going to take the next couple of weeks off except for my Patreon live streams. So have a safe new year. Thank God 2020 is almost over. I will see you guys in 2021. That's it for now. Go be creative. Thank you.